So, hey, let's say you really need to extract information from someone, and they're really persistent in keeping their secrets. Or you need to coerce a confession from someone to save your ass from misguidingly shooting a civilian. Or you found out they spam Orisa in Overwatch once they start losing, so you believe any pain done upon them is justifiable under God. Whether you're a federal agent or a terror group, or you really need to know someone's celebrity crush, being educated in the craft of bodily harm will leave you more well-read and less ignorant of a person. Cultured, some may say. So I compiled the list of what I believe effective torture methods throughout history to see if you could find the one just for you. The reason I'm making this list is because I've seen people constantly make rookie mistakes when trying to extract information from a detainee. Remember, people will go into shock, or worst state, fucking die, dude. Not productive when trying to get information at all, so try avoiding that. Also, since murder is illegal, I'm pretty sure, I don't know, something with bureaucracy or strict regulation against taking a life. Honestly, I think it's a load of bullshit served by the government to keep us down and subservient. You want to ensure your techniques are not too dangerous. Enough leeway for them to gather their thoughts and carefully assess the situation. Then you get back to the business with the chainsaw. Secondly, if you plan on gathering data from this interaction, make sure you have your questions ready. Don't beat around the bush. If you want direct answers, then ask direct questions. Anecdotal evidence from me, but based on my experience, people I tortured often end up bleeding out before they get a chance to answer my inquiries. Rude, but what could you do? Nowadays, people glorify narcissism and self-indulgence instead of helping one another. Take me back to the 1930s, when torture was more civil and victims were more respectful. So make sure you have your questions written on a notepad. Okay, now let's get to the torture techniques. The rack. Some quick insight about the rack, which I took and reworded from Britannica's description of it. A gruesome device was employed to forcibly elicit confession and damning information from individuals accused of treason, heresy, and conspiracy. The torture rack thus became a symbol of brutal methods employed in the pursuit of justice during these historical periods. Essentially, you set the bed-like contraption that is off the ground, then you tie your victim's ankles and wrists to wheels which would slowly pull apart your victim's limbs. This technique is quite effective and not to mention, controllable. Unlike other torture methods, such as boiling someone inside a bronze bull, which could quickly get out of hand, you have total control of the wheel to pull and rip apart as you please. This method does need you to get handy with a hammer and a trip to your local hardware store, but once you set this bad boy up, you have a rack for future endeavors. It's an investment, kinda like building a shed from scratch. Yeah, it's a lot of work to do at first, but once you're done, it's worth the work. Flagellations. A cost-friendly approach that is intuitive and malleable at approach. All you need is some rope to tie your victim and any implement of your choice to begin beating the victim with. It could be a whip, rod, switches, a sjambok, a knot, or whatever tickles your fancy. It all works. That's what makes this approach so user-friendly. So go ahead and capture that annoying victim of yours and teach him a lesson in flogging. Crucifixion. An obvious torture method of when you pin an individual on a cross. Notable figures who went through this are people like Spartacus, a former gladiator who escaped and became a leader of a slave uprising against the Roman Empire. He definitely deserved to be crucified. Can't let these slaves be thinking they have a shot at freedom, you feel me? Who else? Jesus Christ? I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but he is your Lord and Savior and you should accept him into your heart. Thank you. However, I wanted to put this on the list to show you what not to do. You want to extract information or coerce a confession, not accidentally create a new religious or political martyr that would upstart a revolution. Zealots bother you throughout your life for murdering their god would be quite bothersome. Could you imagine waking up in the morning with crazy people outside your door, calling you a terrible person for torturing someone like this? Like, come on. Cancel culture has gone too far. The woke anti-torture mob gonna continue being woke, I guess. Plus, this is probably too much work and would take a lot of physical labor. Having to raise a cross with a person hanging from it, the back pain, might accidentally start another crusade. Best to avoid this one. Head crushers. According to Wikipedia, it was a metal device that featured a plate that sat below the victim's jaw, which was connected by a frame to the head as a cap. Then a person would turn the handle which would tighten the device slowly. You guessed it, crushing the head of the victim, crushing the jaw in the process, and possibly the popping of their eyeballs from their sockets. Unlike the rack, this is a bit more humble in its approach and targeted. And just like the rack, it's easily controllable by the user and can be stopped at any moment. This could mean you won't need to dispose of them after, and they can just go home. Luckily enough, I'm pretty sure your local branded stores will have one of these at the back. You just got to ask. Could also be good for other occasions, such as going outside but your hair is fucked up, or you don't got hair. You could pop this bad boy and have a cool hat. Waterboarding. The favorite interrogation technique used by your local freedom-loving government. Just ask the CIA. They love this method, especially during the War of Terror. It involves restraining an individual and covering the victim's face with a wet cloth that would restrict airflow. Then you would just pour water all over the person's face, which will simulate the sensation of drowning. If you want to find out how effective this is, a prominent defender of waterboarding was Christopher Hitchens, a controversial author, journalist, and outspoken atheist. He claimed that waterboarding wasn't torture, so he decided to test it on himself. Well, after being waterboarded himself, he immediately declared that it was definitely fucking torture.
It's annoying to me now to read every time it's discussed in the press or in Congress that it simulates the feeling of drowning. It doesn't simulate the feeling of drowning. You are being drowned slowly.
Genius, Hitchens. Another profound hitch slap from you, I guess. Subjective to playing Valorant. Holy. Who thought of this evil contraption? Just the work of an absolute devil. Basically, you're forced, and try not to puke here, to play Valorant for an hour straight. I bet you didn't think this list was gonna get this bad, huh? You'll be subjected to the most boring gunplay, retarded player base, and degenerate content. Absolute satanic stuff. Let's move to the next one already. Pillory. Not really harmful, but more to embarrass the person. It consists of a wooden framework with holes for securing a person's head and hands. Then they'll be exposed to the public view and made fun of. Occasionally, they'll throw tomatoes at the poor fella. Really great method if you don't enjoy screams of pain or blood on your floors. Flaying. A gross method and might be too gratuitous. You can always go for something less vile, but if you really want to teach someone a lesson, then this might be the best way to go. It is basically the removal of skin from a person's body while they're still alive. It is excessively painful, but hey, thank goodness you're the one who's doing the torturing, huh? Apparently this method is quite widely condemned today and is considered a human rights violation. But who cares? When was the last time the UN actually stopped a human rights violation, huh? Minotaur Maze. If you're a big fan of Greek mythology, you'd be familiar with this one. It's quite simple to do. Just mine under your home and clear a lot of space, make an almost impossible maze, and toss in a minotaur down there that will freely roam and search for lost victims. Practical and effective. Just ensure you have a well-sharpened battle axe around to give to the minotaur to make it even more of an imposing threat, making them read the average repetitive YA novel. Inundate your victim in a world of bland characters, dogshit world building, shallow moral complexities, and uninspired political subtext. Characters that are so forgettable that even the author struggles to differentiate them. Personalities so uncreative and unoriginal that you don't care whether they survive or not. As for moral complexities, keep them as shallow as a puddle. Avoid any nuanced exploration of ethical dilemmas or philosophical questions. Instead, spoon-feed the audience with a diluted version of morality that fits neatly into a black and white worldview. To complete the torture, introduce a love triangle. Feature two virtually identical white guys who lack any distinguishing characteristics other than their inexplicable adoration for the protagonist. Make sure their only purpose in this story is to provide some contrived romantic tension that adds nothing of value. Throw in some ham-fisted political subtext that mirrors real-world issues without any depth or understanding. Make sure it serves no purpose other than to give the illusion of substance. Make them read Berserk. As opposed to torturing your victim with garbage slop written by your average Starbucks enjoyer, what about torture your victim with one of the most tragic pieces of literature there is? First, lure them in with compelling characters, each intricately woven with layers of depth and nuance. Make sure they form emotional connections, attach their hearts to the struggle, aspirations, and torment of these brilliantly crafted personas. Let the readers become entangled into the gripping story, a relentless descent into the abyss of human nature and the supernatural. Let them witness the masterful storytelling and the art that would stick with them forever. Then at the peak of emotional investment, mercilessly strip away the illusion of safety and happiness. Introduce gut-wrenching twists that shatters the very foundation of hope. Then true cruelty lies in the hand of reality. Inform your captive reader that the story, for all of its brilliance, will remain incomplete. Share the devastating truth that the genius behind this epic tale, Kentaro Miura, has passed away. As your victim grapples with the realization that their narrative they invested so much in will never find closure, let them mourn not only the characters, but also the creative mind that birthed them. The cruel twist isn't just within the confines of the story, but extends to the real world. If that isn't torture, then I don't know what is. Next torture, stab them a couple of times, I don't know, stab them 28 times. Just make sure it doesn't kill them, so be careful. Anyway, There are a bunch more methods out there, so if you didn't hear anything here that interested you, don't worry. History is filled with examples you could mimic yourself. There's plenty of readily available information for you to find, or maybe get creative. Try making your own methods and pile them onto the list. Whatever you do, this is a free country, and you get to do whatever you want, man.